The god beast charged. The human's answer was its heart in his hands. The transport ship's floor was slick with purple blood, and Dominic Rourke counted 3 seconds before the Korathi guard's body stopped twitching. The sedative they'd given the prisoners had been calculated to wear off at precisely this moment, timed for atmospheric entry, when the guards would be strapped in for turbulence, confident their cargo was unconscious. The neural inhibitor he'd trained his body to metabolize faster than normal had given him a 40-second window. 40 seconds to change everything. "Stay down," Dominic muttered to the other prisoners who were just beginning to stir, confusion clouding their features as they emerged from drugged sleep. The ship shuddered as it entered atmosphere, the hull groaning under pressure like a dying beast. Through the porthole, he glimpsed a world of crimson forests and jagged mountains beneath a binary sunset, clouds like blood smears across an amber sky. The Korathi hunting preserve, where those who'd killed Korathi in battle were brought as special prey. Not weak, but dangerous enough to provide sport. Entertainment for a species that had forgotten what real danger looked like. The second guard entered to check on unusual noises, mandibles clicking in confusion at the scene. His companion down, blood pooling in zero-gravity droplets, one prisoner standing. Dominic dropped from where he'd wedged himself against the ceiling, using the ship's shuddering to mask his movement. His thumbs found the pressure points beneath the guard's secondary jaw. Intelligence had paid 3 agents' lives for that anatomy lesson. The Korathi dropped, paralyzed, but alive. Neurons misfiring in a cascade that would leave him conscious but helpless for hours. No need for unnecessary killing yet. Everything had its moment. "Holy shit," one of the prisoners whispered, a corporate contractor from Mars who'd defended his mining platform too well. "You're him. You're the Kepler Station guy." Dominic didn't respond, busy arranging the scene. The paralyzed guard positioned to look dead, splashing blood for effect, angling the body to hide its breathing. Everything had to appear exactly right for the next phase. He pulled the guard's plasma blade free, felt its weight, the way it hummed with barely contained energy. The weapon was keyed to biological matter, not specific DNA, an oversight that spoke to Korathi arrogance. The ship landed hard, repulsor fields failing to fully compensate for the preserve's gravity, 1.3 times Earth standard. Dominic felt his knees compress, adjusted his stance, let his body remember the training in variable gravity chambers. The cargo door hissed open to reveal 3 Korathi hunters waiting on the landing pad, afternoon heat shimmering off their ceremonial armor. Their leader stepped forward, trophy scars covering his hide like a roadmap of violence, 4 arms spread in a gesture that managed to be both welcoming and threatening. 2 guards dead? Interesting. His English was accented but clear, each word carefully pronounced through mandibles that weren't designed for human speech. "You're the one who killed 12 of our warriors on Kepler Station." So they knew who he was. Good. That had been the point of Kepler, to earn a reputation worth bringing to their attention. 3 months of planning for 6 hours of combat that had left 13 Korathi dead and humanity on their radar as something more than prey. 13, actually, Dominic corrected, watching how they shifted their weight, cataloging weaknesses in their stance. The hunter's mandibles spread in what might have been amusement. The female, she barely counted as a warrior, more scientist than soldier. She died begging, I heard. That was a lie. Dominic had been there, had seen her die analyzing human combat patterns even as plasma burned through her chest. But the lie served his purpose. "Did she?" Dominic asked, moving slightly to the left, forcing them to adjust their positions. "Is that what they told you?" The hunter's 4 eyes narrowed. What else would? Dominic moved, using the hunter's moment of uncertainty as an opening. Not to kill. That would be too easy, too expected. Instead, he grabbed the hunter's primary wrist, used the alien's own strength and momentum to drive his ceremonial blade into his companion's shoulder, twisting on the way in to maximize damage and ensure it caught between armor plates. Then he rolled away as the injured Korathi lashed out at his leader in pain and confusion, their clicks and roars filling the air with alien fury. "You were saying something about females?" Dominic asked as the 3 hunters untangled themselves, purple blood dripping from the friendly fire wound, staining the landing pad in spreading pools that steamed in the heat. The leader snarled, a sound like tearing metal. Hunt protocols are suspended. Kill him. Make it slow. Make him beg like his friends on Kepler. They charged together, coordinated despite the injury, moving with the practiced ease of pack hunters who'd worked together for decades. Dominic retreated into the forest, letting them follow. He needed witnesses for what came next, and 3 wouldn't be enough. The crimson trees closed around him, their canopy filtering light into blood-colored fragments that danced across the forest floor. He could hear them behind him, their clicking communication coordinating the chase. They were faster than him in straight lines, stronger in direct confrontation. But this wasn't about speed or strength. This was about intelligence, about turning their assumptions against them. The hunt lasted 2 hours. Dominic led them through terrain he'd studied from orbital photos, memorized during the 3-week journey in the prisoner hold. Every ravine, every cliff, every water source had been catalogued, turned into potential weapons in his mind. He passed other hunting parties who joined the chase, their excited clicks echoing through the forest like deadly rain. He let them catch glimpses of him, stayed just far enough ahead to be tantalizing, just close enough to seem catchable. By the time he reached the killing ground he'd chosen, a canyon with perfect acoustics and only one real entrance, he had 15 Korathi following him. Their breath came in eager pants, mandibles already spreading in anticipation of the kill. They thought they had him cornered. They were wrong. He killed the first 3 efficiently, using the canyon's echo to disorient them. A thrown rock from the eastern wall, its sound bouncing and multiplying until it seemed like an army was attacking. When they separated to search, he picked them off one by one, quick, brutal, using their own weapons when possible. The first died with a plasma blade through his secondary heart. Dominic had studied their anatomy, knew they could survive losing one heart, but not both. The second fell to his own companion's panicked shot when Dominic used him as a shield. The third simply disappeared into a pit Dominic had noticed from orbit, its bottom lined with the bones of previous victims. The 4th hunter died with his own blade in his throat, driven there by a simple redirect of his charging momentum, Aikido adapted for alien physiology. The 5th fell to a rock slide Dominic had prepared during his 2-hour lead, tons of crimson stone crushing armor and bone alike. The 6th tried to flee, only to run into Dominic's improvised garrote made from the 2nd guard's armor straps. Enough. The female voice carried absolute authority, cutting through the chaos like a plasma blade through flesh. The remaining hunters immediately stopped, backing away with their heads lowered in submission as she emerged from the shadows above, dropping from a ledge 50 feet up to land in perfect silence despite the distance. She was different from the males, leaner, more refined, built for speed rather than brute force. Her dark fur was marked by bioluminescent patterns that shifted like living tattoos, creating hypnotic whirls that drew the eye and confused distance perception. 4 arms, yes, but proportioned differently, more elegant, fingers ending in retractable claws rather than the fixed talons of the males. Her amber eyes studied him with an intelligence that made the males look like blunt instruments, obsolete models of evolution. "You're the Earth soldier from Kepler Station," she said, not a question but a statement of fact. Her voice was different from the male's, more modulated, almost musical despite its predatory undertones. "And you're watching instead of hunting." "I'm evaluating. There's a difference." She circled him, keeping precise distance, never quite entering his strike range, but never so far that she couldn't close distance instantly. Her movement was hypnotic, designed to confuse prey, to make them dizzy trying to track her. Dominic kept his eyes fixed on a point past her, using peripheral vision instead. "You killed those 6 to make a point. What point?" "That your species has grown lazy. You hunt prey. You've forgotten how to fight warriors." She made a sound that might have been laughter, musical and threatening at once. "And you're a warrior?" "I'm a soldier. There's a difference." "Explain." She stopped moving, focused entirely on him now, those amber eyes seeming to see through skin to intent. "Warriors seek glory, personal honor, individual victory. They fight for themselves, for their name, for their legacy." He gestured to the bodies cooling in the canyon dust. Soldiers seek mission completion. We fight for objectives, for our unit, for our species. Your hunters are warriors. That's why they're dead. She moved closer, close enough that he could smell her, ozone and copper and something sharp like cinnamon, with an undertone of pheromones his human biology couldn't fully process, but still responded to. Her secondary arms folded, while her primary ones gestured in what might have been appreciation. You know who I am? Someone important enough that these hunters backed off at a word, someone who observes before acting, someone smart enough to be dangerous. Flattery human? Assessment Korathi. Flattery implies exaggeration. Everything I've said is observable fact. She tilted her head, the gesture oddly bird-like. Seren'ka, daughter of Gorvan the Eternal, prime predator of the Korathi Empire. I evaluate new prey for the preserve, determine their threat level, their entertainment value. She paused, studying him with those amber eyes that seemed to shift color in the dying light. You're not prey, are you? No. Then what are you? An opportunity. This time her laugh was genuine, rich, and full of dark amusement that promised either death or something else entirely. For what? For your species to remember what made you apex predators. Before you got soft, before you started hunting primitives and calling it sport, before you became more concerned with ceremony than survival. Her hand moved to the weapon at her hip, not drawing it, just resting there, a subtle warning that she could end this conversation in violence at any moment. Careful, human. You're impressive for your species, but... There's a Morgeth on this preserve, Dominic interrupted, knowing the significance of what he was about to say. Your people use energy weapons to kill it in grand ceremonies, whole packs working together. Heavy weapons, shields, sometimes air support. I'm going to kill it with my bare hands. Silence stretched between them, taut as a garrote. Several hunters laughed, nervous sounds that died quickly when Seren'ka didn't join them. Her eyes narrowed, calculating, reassessing. That's impossible, she said finally. The Morgeth has killed thousands. It's been alive for 3 millennia. It's not just an animal, it's perfection given form. For a warrior, yes, it's impossible. For a soldier? He shrugged, the gesture deliberately casual, hiding the acceleration of his pulse. It's just another problem to solve. Every system has a weakness, every perfection has a flaw. My father would have to authorize a sacred hunt. The Morgeth is not released for simple executions. For someone who kills 6 of your hunters in single combat, who makes your species look weak, who challenges everything you believe about your superiority. He met her gaze directly, saw her pupils dilate slightly. Interest, not aggression. Your father will authorize it because not to would be admitting fear, admitting that a human might actually succeed. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. You're trying to manipulate me. I'm trying to interest you. There's a difference. Manipulation implies deception. Everything I've said is true. Everything I'm about to do is real. She studied him for a long moment, then touched the communication device on her wrist. The conversation that followed was in rapid Korathi, clicks, growls, and ultrasonic harmonics that human ears could barely detect. He caught a few words he recognized: Morgeth, human, impossible, and interestingly, evolution. The conversation was lengthy, heated at times. He could hear another voice from the device, older, gravely with age and authority. Finally, she lowered her arm, something like anticipation flickering across her features. 1 hour. The Morgeth will be released in 1 hour. She moved closer, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her. Korathi ran hotter than humans, their metabolism more aggressive. Her voice dropped to something more intimate, meant only for him. You'll die, you know, painfully, slowly. It likes to play with its food. It will tear you apart piece by piece, keep you alive for hours to savor your agony. Maybe, but you'll watch, won't you? Yes. Why? She was close enough now that he could see the pulse in her throat, quick and excited beneath the dark fur. Her breathing had changed, become deeper. Because you're the first interesting thing to happen in a century. Because you don't smell like fear even now, facing certain death. And because you look at me and see a soldier, not just another hunter, not just the prime predator's daughter, not just a female to be claimed or avoided. Her hand touched his chest, feeling his heartbeat through the torn fabric of his prisoner's uniform. Her palm was rough, designed for gripping prey, but her touch was surprisingly gentle. "My mate was killed at Kepler Station, the female you mentioned. She was one of our best, a researcher who wanted to be a warrior." Dominic went still, his mind racing through implications. The female at Kepler had died studying him, recording everything even as plasma fire tore through their barricades. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. She died in battle, not in some ceremonial hunt. She died trying to understand human combat patterns, to analyze your techniques. She died with purpose." Her claws extended slightly, pricking through his shirt but not breaking skin, a warning or perhaps a promise. "If you survive the Morgeth, which you won't, I have questions. About how 13 humans held off 40 Korathi for 3 hours, about tactics that turned a mining station into a killing field, about soldiers versus warriors." She leaned in, breath hot against his ear, her voice dropping to a whisper that sent involuntary shivers down his spine. "About whether humans are worth more than hunting, about whether my mate's theories were correct." "What theories?" "That humans were more dangerous than anyone realized. That your physical weakness was a disguise for something else. That you turned every disadvantage into evolution. That we should either ally with you or exterminate you completely before you became a threat." "And which did she recommend?" Seren'ka pulled back, smiled with too many teeth, the expression both threatening and oddly attractive. "She died before finishing her analysis, but she was leaning toward alliance. She said humans had something we'd lost, desperation that breeds innovation." "And you, what do you think?" She studied him for a long moment, her 4 hands moving in subtle patterns he couldn't interpret. "I think you're about to die horribly, but I also think, I hope, that you might surprise me." "I live for surprises." "No," she corrected, moving back toward the forest. "You'll die for them, but perhaps that death will mean something." Then she was gone, vanishing into the crimson foliage with a speed that made Dominic's eyes water trying to track her. Other hunters remained, watching, waiting, placing bets in their clicking language on how long he'd last. He heard numbers, seconds, minutes. No one bet on hours. Dominic spent the hour preparing, not frantically, but methodically, like he'd been trained. He studied wind patterns by throwing handfuls of dust, watching how air currents moved through the canyon. Tested ground consistency, looking for places that would give way under massive weight. Mapped sight lines, blind spots, choke points where size would be a disadvantage rather than an asset. He gathered materials, not weapons but tools. Stones with specific weights and edges, vines tested for tensile strength, braided together for additional durability. The chitinous remains of the hunters he'd killed broken into specific shapes, not sharp enough to penetrate the Morgeth's hide, but perhaps enough for more delicate work. As he worked, he thought about Seren'ka, about the way she moved, the way she observed. She was dangerous in a way the males weren't, not just physically but intellectually. The fact that she was watching, evaluating, suggested this was about more than just entertainment. This was a test, but not just of him, of possibilities, of futures. The horn sounded, a deep, resonant note that seemed to come from the planet itself, vibrating through stone and bone alike. The ground shook, rhythmic impacts of something massive approaching. Trees in the distance began to fall. The Morgeth arrived like a force of nature. It was magnificent in its horror. 15 feet of armored death, muscles rippling beneath natural plating that looked like volcanic rock fused with organic matter. 6 legs for stability, each as thick as Dominic's torso, ending in claws that left gouges in solid stone. 4 arms for killing, the upper pair massive and powerful, the lower pair more dexterous, almost delicate in their precision. Its head was mostly teeth, row after row of them, with eyes that burned with ancient intelligence. This wasn't just an animal, it was a weaponized ecosystem, 3,000 years of selective breeding and natural evolution creating the perfect killer. But perfection bred complacency, and complacency was a weakness. Dominic didn't run. He observed. The creature favored its front right leg, an old injury, perhaps from the only time anyone had come close to killing it. Its armor had gaps where the plates met, necessary for movement but vulnerable to precise strikes. It relied heavily on intimidation, roaring to freeze prey with fear, taking its time because nothing had ever truly challenged it. The Morgeth studied him in return, those ancient eyes showing curiosity. It had never encountered prey that didn't run or attack in panic. Dominic simply stood there, breathing steadily, watching. When it charged, he was already moving. Not away, but at an angle, forcing it to adjust mid-stride. The slight favoring of its leg made it overcorrect just slightly, its massive bulk working against it. Physics didn't care about reputation or legend. He threw powdered bone from his earlier kills into its eyes, not to blind it, but to irritate, to make it blink, to break its focus. In that split second of distraction, he rolled beneath it, came up behind, and jumped onto its back, using the handholds he'd identified during his observation. Scars from ancient battles, places where the armor had grown back imperfectly. The Morgeth bucked like a mountain having a seizure, its roar shaking leaves from trees hundreds of meters away. But Dominic had expected that. He used the motion, let it carry him forward toward the neck. His hand found the gap where the armor plates met. Not to reach the heart, that was impossible from this angle. Instead, he drove the sharpened chitin from the dead hunters into the secondary nerve cluster there. The same evolutionary weakness the smaller Korathi possessed. The beast's back half collapsed, 6 tons of muscle suddenly without proper coordination. It roared in rage, and something that might have been surprise tried to turn, but with only 4 legs working properly, it was off balance, struggling to compensate for a fighting style it had never needed to learn. Dominic dropped, rolled, came up with the sharp stone he'd prepared. Its edge honed on other rocks until it could slice skin with a touch. The Morgeth lunged awkwardly, its movement still powerful but now telegraphed by its injury. Dominic went low, drove the stone into the soft tissue behind its front knee, not fatal, but debilitating. Another nerve cluster, another weakness that 3,000 years of dominance had never forced it to protect. The creature crashed down with enough force to crack stone, still dangerous but no longer mobile, its roars shifting from anger to something else, confusion, perhaps even fear. Now came the hard part. Dominic circled the fallen beast, staying out of reach of its arms but close enough to be tempting bait. It tracked him, intelligent eyes burning with rage and something like respect. He waited, patient as a sniper, counting heartbeats, watching for the tell he knew would come. There, a subtle shift in weight, muscles coiling. It lunged again, desperation making it extend too far, reaching beyond its stable base. Dominic caught one of its arms. Not to hold it, he wasn't nearly strong enough for that. Instead, he redirected it, used its own momentum to drive its claws into its throat. Not deep enough to kill, but enough to make it rear back in surprise and pain. In that moment of exposed vulnerability, Dominic's hand shot into the wound, found the artery that evolution had never bothered to protect, because nothing had ever gotten this close before, and tore with fingers strengthened by months of specific training. Purple blood fountained in pressurized streams, painting the canyon walls in abstract patterns. The Morgeth's eyes widened in something that transcended species, the universal surprise of realizing you're dying. It made one last attempt to grab him, but Dominic stepped back, watching as 3,000 years of apex predation ended in arterial spray and desperate gasps. When it finally stilled, the forest silent except for his own harsh breathing, he reached into the throat wound, found the heart, massive, still warm, the size of his torso, and pulled. The organ came free with a wet sound that echoed in the sudden silence. He stood there, covered in purple blood that steamed in the cool air, holding the heart of their god-beast above his head. The silence was absolute, profound, the kind that preceded historical moments. Then Gorvon himself emerged from the gathering crowd, ancient and scarred, his white fur marked with wounds from centuries of hunts. He moved with the careful grace of something that had survived everything the galaxy could throw at it and remained unbroken. His 4 eyes fixed on Dominic with an expression that might have been disbelief, or possibly hunger. "Impossible," he said simply, the word carrying no anger, just a statement of everything his species believed. "No," Dominic replied, lowering the heart. "Just improbable. Your species forgot the difference." Seren'ka appeared at her father's side, her expression unreadable, those amber eyes reflecting the dying light of the twin suns. How? You hunt for sport, for glory, for tradition. You follow patterns that haven't changed in millennia. Dominic dropped the heart at their feet, the wet sound of it hitting earth somehow final. I killed for survival, for purpose, for change. That's why humanity survived when 100 other species didn't. We don't just adapt to threats, we become more dangerous than them. You propose an alliance, Gorvan said. It wasn't a question. I propose evolution. Your strength and instincts combined with our tactics and adaptability. Your people are magnificent killers. But you've forgotten how to be soldiers. You've forgotten that the universe doesn't care about your traditions. Why should we listen to one human? Because this one human just killed your god with sharp rocks and patience. Because I spent 3 months learning to metabolize your sedatives faster. Because Kepler Station was a calculated sacrifice to get your attention. Because my species spent 6 months planning this moment. He met the ancient predator's eyes. And because there are things in the dark between galaxies that neither of our species can face alone. Things that make the Morgeth look like prey. Gorvan turned to his daughter. Your evaluation? Seren'ka stepped forward, moved to stand before Dominic. Up close, he could see the calculation in her eyes, the way she was reassessing everything. Kepler Station wasn't random, was it? You knew we'd take survivors. This was planned. Commander Vasquez sends her regards. She thought you might be interested in a demonstration. 13 deaths for a demonstration. 13 deaths to prevent a war that would kill millions. We ran the projections. We could fight you, maybe take 1/3 of your forces with us before extinction. Or, he gestured to the dead Morgeth, we could become something new, something better, something that the real threats in the universe might actually fear. She was quiet for a moment, then reached out to touch the blood on his face, marking herself with it in a gesture that made several watchers gasp. The significance wasn't lost on him. She was claiming association with his kill. By combat law, you've earned the right to claim a mate from among the unmated females. I'm not interested in claims. No, then what are you interested in? Partnership, equals, someone who sees beyond tradition to possibility, someone who understands that strength isn't just about claws and teeth. She moved closer, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her, see the pulse in her throat accelerating. My mate died at Kepler. Part of me should hate you. But you don't. No, she died as a soldier, not a hunter. You gave her that, and her research. She paused, seemed to come to a decision. Her research suggested humanity was evolving faster than any species we'd encountered, that you were dangerous not despite your weakness but because of it, that you turned every disadvantage into a lesson in survival. Smart mate. Yes, she was. Her upper hands framed his face while her lower hands rested on his waist, claws retracted, touch surprisingly gentle. And she would have found this fascinating, a human who used our own pride against us, who killed a god not with strength but with patience. Is that acceptance? That's interest. Acceptance comes later, if you survive it. Survive what? She pulled him close, her strength undeniable but restrained, and kissed him. It was nothing like a human kiss, sharper, more dangerous, tasting of copper and ozone and something wild. Her teeth grazed his lips, not quite breaking skin but promising they could. There was heat there, curiosity, a hunger that transcended species. When she pulled back, her eyes were fully dilated, breathing quick. Me? She said simply. I'm not some trophy to be claimed, human. If we do this, partnership, alliance, whatever you want to call it, you'll have to prove yourself again, and again, and again. Dominic, my name is Dominic, and I wouldn't want it any other way. She made that purring sound deep in her chest, vibrating through both their bodies. You realize what you're asking for? I'm not human. We're not compatible in simple ways. Nothing about this was ever going to be simple. Her lower hands pulled him tighter against her, while her upper hands tangled in his hair, claws extending just enough to scratch his scalp. My people will try to kill you. Many will see you as an abomination. And you? I see you as evolution, as the answer to a question I didn't know I was asking. She leaned in, teeth grazing his throat, marking him. "And as mine, if you'll have me." The crowd roared, approval, challenge, acknowledgement of change, the sound echoing across the preserve and into the night. But Dominic barely heard it, focused entirely on the female in his arms, on the feel of her against him, alien and familiar at once. "The alliance," Gorvan announced, his voice carrying absolute authority, "will be considered. The human has earned that much. But know this, Dominic Rourke of Earth, if this is deception, if this is weakness disguised as strength, we will hunt your species to extinction. And if it's truth," the old predator smiled, a terrifying expression, "then we will become something the universe has never seen, hunters with the minds of soldiers, killers with the patience of prophets." Later, after the crowd had dispersed and the twin suns had set, Seren'ka led him to a structure at the edge of the preserve, part shelter, part observation post. Inside, it was sparse but functional, with equipment he recognized as research materials. "This was hers," Seren'ka said, gesturing to the space. "My mate's. She would bring specimens here, study them. And now it's ours, if you're serious about this partnership." She moved to him, all four hands working at his blood-soaked clothing. "But first, we need to discuss terms. Such as, you'll teach our warriors to think like soldiers. I'll teach your soldiers to hunt like predators." Her hands found skin, claws tracing patterns that made him shiver. "And together, we'll become something neither species could be alone." That's the professional arrangement. What about the personal one? She smiled, dangerous and beautiful. "That we'll figure out as we go, but I should warn you, Korathi mate for life. Once we do this, you're mine forever." "Funny," Dominic said, pulling her against him, feeling her dual heartbeats against his chest. "Humans have a similar concept." Their mouths met again, hungrier this time, and he tasted victory and future and something that might have been love, if love could exist between predator and prey, turned partners. Outside, something screamed in the distance. Not on this world, but somewhere among the stars. Something that had never known fear before, but was about to learn what happened when humans and Korathi put aside their differences. The beast had roared. Humanity's answer had been to rip out its heart. And in doing so, they'd found something neither species had expected: each other.